Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Weather Academy. Good to have you here. And thought I'd chat a little bit about some freezing rain because we're in that time of year where freezing rain and freezing precipitation can be really a pain. And this is when it becomes fairly common here. So, what I'd like to do is kind of share with you, um, you know, kind of the setup here. Actually, before we do that, let me share from a courtesy of the National Weather Service. Where was this at? National Weather Service in Blacksburg, Virginia. Okay. We always, like to borrow from others, but this is a nice picture here. And let's see if I can, not probably can't there. But you can, if you look real closely here, you can see that we do have the differences between rain, freezing rain, sleet, and snow, and basically what you need. So what you have here is basically warm air that's in the yellow and the colder air that's in the blue. Now remember, again, as a brief review, warm air is less dense than cold air. So when warm air tries to, when warm air and cold air meet, okay, the warm air doesn't push the cold air. The warm air has to ride over it if it's traveling faster than the cold air. A warm front is really not warm air pushing cold air, it's cold air retreating and the warm air coming in to replace it. And that's what we have with the warm front. It's also a great setup as far as allowing for any kind of freezing precipitation to occur. So what we have here, we have the warm air. Let's say, the warm air is coming in and it's overriding this area of cold. Now, the warm front would usually be about right here that I'm circling my cursor here. So after the warm front goes through, typically the air is traditionally warm enough at all levels. So what we get is straight rain. Now, once you go across the warm front, like say going north across that warm front and going into a little bit of cold air here at the surface, this is where you can get into the freezing rain. So the warm air comes in aloft, let's say it's above freezing, so it takes any precipitation and makes it rain. When it hits this colder air, it doesn't have time to freeze into an ice ball before it hits the surface. So it falls onto a surface like a pavement or a tree or a power line as rain. And then because the temperatures here are below freezing, it'll freeze on contact. And that's what we call freezing rain. Very dangerous. And in my opinion, one of the most dangerous wintertime weather, almost up there with blizzards, because it is very treacherous and it can cause a lot of damage. Now, farther away from the warm front, the warm air is a little higher up, and because it's kind of, you see, it's kind of riding a slope here. So now anything that falls through the warm air is enough to make it, turned into liquid. But now the cold air is much thicker. And therefore, we have time for the rain to change, not into a snowflake. That's not what happens, okay? When you put a tray of water into the freezer, do you have snow when you take it out the next day? No, you have ice. And that's what happens here. So it turns into ice, and that's what we call a sleet. Sleet can still be treacherous because sleet, basically, sleet is like little marbles. And ever walk on marbles? Don't. I don't recommend it because you're going to slip and fall. Now imagine your car going over the marbles. Now, in many instances, a sleet is very small, and the heat from the car tires and maybe heat from the ground will help melt some of the sleet. But it can be still very dangerous in its own right. Now, once you get farther away, a couple, maybe 100 miles from the warm front, the warm air hasn't gotten there yet, so it's cold enough for everything to fall as snow. So with that in mind, let's go back to our weather map here. And here's actually a classic setup here. Move out just a little bit. And what we have typically a good setup for sleet or freezing precipitation. You have a cold high pressure. In this case, it's over Michigan. And normally, here's the warm front right here. Now, a lot of times the precipitation that's in between here is usually a little bit closer to the front, but it's the same basic premise. So with this high pressure, you have a cold northeast wind or a northerly wind, okay, of cold air. Here you have a warm front and you have warm air that's going over that cold air. And the overrunning, in this case, is causing mainly snow. So because it's so far from the warm front, that warm air hasn't really been able to get to the higher levels to change anything to other than snow. Now, but you notice here, if you look closely, we do have a little bit of pink here. And then that pink, that's where we're getting that frozen precipitation in the form of what is probably either freezing rain or sleet. A little thin area here. Now, eventually, what will happen is this warm front moves toward the north. And eventually, as I'm making this recording, it's Tuesday. So if you're watching this Wednesday, this may already be happening. That freezing precipitation will be over our neck of the woods. In fact, let me go and show you our futurecast here. And normally when you see it, it comes up as pink. So here it is. And notice the time frame here, getting about 5 o'clock. Again, probably has already started by the time you look at this. And so that's what we're getting. Notice the surface winds are out of the southeast, okay? And so they're trying to, but the warm air coming up from the south is overrunning this cold air, and that's where we're getting this frozen precipitation. Now, eventually, as the warm front moves north, we'll start to see more green come in. That means the warm air is starting to get better entrenched here at the surface, and anything that is frozen will turn into rain. But eventually it moves on out, and actually we did expect some sun to come out for this afternoon. So there you have it. A little bit of discussion here about how frozen precipitation occurs and how we get the freezing rain, sleet, and snow. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy your day, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.